This is kind of a heavy topic this morning. I didn't really know how to express myself this week after one more unbelievable mass shooting in the United States in Texas in a church. I was in a pretty low place at times this week, and I know that probably even the staff felt that when you go to a very low place, a talkative soul like me suddenly finds very few words, and it's a place that sometimes maybe an extrovert like me goes kicking and screaming because I like to talk, but sometimes words are few. When I think the overwhelming sense this week for me was it seems like the violence is just not ending. And you wrap that into Remembrance Day and the issues around the world right now with whether it's North Korea or whether it's Middle East, whether it's Zimbabwe, wrestling with who's leading that country, it just goes on and on. But I think our faith has something to help us with that, and has helped me. So let me lighten the mood for a little minute. So betrayal is an unbelievable thing. My daughter came to me this week and she said she's been so enjoying her teaching experience, a newly graduate student with her Master's of Education from U of T, and she's working in a setting that the students face many challenges in their personal life. For some of them, it's a case of parental issues at home. Sometimes it's drug issues. As a teacher, she's learning very quickly. Good days are when the students show up. Good days can be when the students just share who they are, and a lot of the nonsense that distracts from education is gone, and that doesn't happen every day by any means. But on a funny note, one of her professors had reached out to her this week and said, I've been in contact by the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the coach, I guess. And this professor and Chelsea worked together in the summer, and they really get along quite well. She said to Chelsea, there's someone on the team that would really like some tutoring. Now, somehow my daughter learned something about self-care. I don't know who in the world taught her about self-care. She looked at us at the dinner table and said, I told my professor I'm already going to somebody's home who's dealing with some issues that they can't be in the classroom. I'm tutoring already in someone's house. I've got enough on my plate. I looked across the table. I will drive you to Toronto with Maple Leaf. Yeah, she's not caught up in sports, no. So I said, you're really going to tell your professor you're not going to tutor a Maple Leaf? Anyway, she is a gifted soul, and I'm glad she's doing what she needs to do. But I felt a little betrayal, let me tell you. I was like, come on, some tickets for Dad, let's go. Interestingly, in the Bible, as Ken, I selected some scripture readings that you could really hone in on the fact that whether it's the psalmist that's can't believe that the people he goes to worship with in the house of God are turning on him, or probably one of my favorite books of the whole Bible is Job, and Job is like in disbelief that it's his friends who have betrayed him by, instead of listening to him, they're telling him what he did wrong. Have you been there? Where something really is, it happened in Job, unjust, unfair, overwhelmed him in his life. And instead of someone just listening to his pain, telling him what he did wrong. And he felt that sense of betrayal. You all know the classic story of Samson and Delilah, of course, I'm sure at some level. And even beautiful Delilah, as much as Samson was this handsome guy with long hair, she decided, it was better to turn him in to the Philistines by discovering the secret of his strength, which was his beautiful long hair, which she decided to cut to achieve her goal. Yeah, the Bible, as Mark Twain says, one of my favorite Mark Twain quotes, It ain't those parts of the Bible I can't understand that bother me. It's the parts that I do. And so in Romans, Paul says, blessed those who persecute you. Keep on blessing them. Never curse them. Do not think that you are wiser than you really are. Do not take revenge, dear friends. Leave that in the hands of God. Or in the famous words of Jesus on the cross, Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. Yeah, these words seem rather odd in a world today where might seems to make right, that the more you can insult somebody, maybe even a political person or anybody, supposedly makes you stronger. The more that you can become captivated by what we hear about in Game of Thrones is really, I'm going to be the queen or the king of the kingdom. So I have a slide I want to show you up here about Game of Thrones. And this kind of captures for me a moment of truth for, I call this gal the dragon lady because she has 3 dragons. And she says, I have been sold like a broodmare. I've been chained and betrayed, raped and defiled. Do you know what kept me from standing through all those years in exile? Faith. Not in any gods, not in myths and legends, in myself. And I find this quite profound because there's a lot of that going on in our world today. I have people that come up to me and say, and they mean it very sincerely, would you do your little, they don't say hocus pocus, but they may as well, would you do your little spiritual thing? But, we're doing it for dad, or we're doing it for so-and-so. We just, they've come to the conclusion that the church or faith is just hocus pocus. She's come to the conclusion in Game of Thrones, which by and large, Game of Thrones, as soon as you start liking somebody, really a character in this series, they usually kill them off. They experience betrayal. They experience what is so hard for us to accept. For example, when my body starts to betray me, when my child betrays me, when the one I love betrays me, when the people I counted on in my life betrays me, and oh my God, could it be that my God has betrayed me? So in this heaviness, my friends, this is where God led me this week. When I was a young student of theology, I was mesmerized by a spiritual hero, Henry Nouwen. Henry Nouwen had taught at Yale Divinity School. Henry Nouwen had certainly been at Harvard, Notre Dame, but more importantly, Henry Nouwen had found his way to Toronto. And he'd come to be lead pastor of the L'Arche community of Daybreak, a community for intellectually challenged men and women that were gathering in a community to simply express Christian values of love and healing. Well, Henry Nouwen had written a book, actually 2 that really grabbed me, and one was Reaching Out, and the other one was The Wounded Healer. Probably The Wounded Healer was the one that just sent me into a place I so needed to be. And here he was, a Catholic theologian, inspiring this Protestant kid in Emmanuel College Seminary. Henry Nouwen spoke about making a place in our heart for God. You look at your date books, if you have date books, or you pull out your calendar on your phone and you're trying to figure out, how you're going to make appointments happen for medical or dinner appointments in your life. Henry Nouwen challenged me to make room in my heart for God. And in so many ways, he said, I'm going to give you a real short summary. Make room in your heart for God. Make room in your heart for the book, the scriptures. And number 3, make room in your heart for the church, for community. For it's in community that we learn so much and are held accountable. That led me, my friends, eventually to be part of almost 25 years now, a once-a-month group. These are ministers. There's priests, Presbyterian, Baptists, I've had Anglican, and there's about 8 of us. We've had people come and go over the 25 years, but every month we have a spiritual director. You're going to say, well, what's a spiritual director? I think a spiritual director is what the world needs right now, and probably each of us. The spiritual director calls us back to, are we making room for God in our lives, in our heart? Are we making room for God? And then lifting up Scripture, lifting up the power of community. Because when you really get deep into your own heart, that's where you discover, as the children teach us, there's lots of joy, there's lots of hopes and dreams, but deep in your heart, you can also discover your regrets, your guilt, your shame, your anger, your pain. And that's what we all need to explore after a week like this, or a day where things have just, as someone said, winter has arrived. So I want to close with this. I was speaking earlier about my daughter's challenge in teaching students, and I remember some of the most gifted teachers are ones that create a safe place for students just to be who they are. As God longs for us to have a safe sense that if we make room for God in our daily life, be that a morning prayer, meditation, a walk, but intentionally make that time for God. You know, I often thought I was trying to find God, but God's, I think, seeking and searching for me and searching for all of us. But when a teacher is able to make a classroom experience a place for a child to really understand they're loved and accepted, this is what happens. So I was reading a young student's essay. They just wrote this essay asking about their life. And I'll summarize it this way. They described their life like a sadness of raindrops that just wouldn't stop. The drops just kept flowing. And the sadness and the deepness of that sadness was overwhelming. And it was in that moment when I read the sadness of those words that I realized that there was a glimmer of hope for this student. Because this student was courageous enough to put this on paper, courageous enough to give it to a teacher, and trusting enough to realize that perhaps, if not the teacher hears what his lament is, that the God who created him and created all of us understands the depth of his sadness and his pain.